A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Easton Family Podcast, and we've got a great podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Blake Lovell aboard. He does great work over at Southeastern 14, and while he does amazing work over at Southeastern 14, people that have not been doing amazing work have been the SEC. It's been a little bit of a rough go of it for them in the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about the teams that got eliminated, but more importantly, turn it forward to the teams on Sunday from the SEC that we're going to be seeing in action. We're going to be breaking down really the entire card that we've got for Sunday, what he all thinks of it, and so much more. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at @JNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we did not get in any Twitter /X questions today other than, what in the heck happened with my bets in the Oregon game? So let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
And if you had Oregon, my goodness, this was a swift kick right into the family jewels as Creighton wins in double overtime 86-73. And if you, like me, also had the under, boy, you survive one overtime just to have your under get toasted in double overtime. That's just a horrible feeling right there. As your main Cuisinart for Oregon, he plays only 29 minutes in this one, but he made them count. He took 33 shots and had 32 points to show for those 33 shots. And Folly Dante, 28 points, 20 rebounds. As for Oregon, they did a solid job on the glass. They do lose that battle 48-43, but Dante gave you a good effort. Ryan Kalkbrenner, he throws in there 14 points. For Oregon, they win the turnover battle in this one, but for Creighton, they go 15 of 39 from three-point range. Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander combining for 38 points. It was just a wild and crazy night. And then you got bench production for Creighton with Jason Green throwing in their 9 rebounds. So Creighton, they are on to the Sweet 16, and so is Arizona. If you took 9 to 9.5 with Dayton, this one was relatively rough as well. As Arizona was controlling throughout, they actually got up 13 points with about 6.5 minutes remaining. They actually got up 15 points, but for Dayton, they tried to make a nice run of it, but for Arizona, just too much. Caleb Love, 19 points, goes 3 of 8 from three-point range, throws in their 5 assists. And for Arizona, they did turn it over quite a bit, 15 turnovers, but they win the rebound battle by a count of 35-31 as Deron Holmes had 23 points, 11 rebounds, did take 17 shots along the way, and did have 4 turnovers. So that was a little bit costly to Dayton. And for Arizona, they continue to be a money-making machine for you against the spread, as it's been a very good tournament for the Pac-12 since when we saw out of Oregon. They're now 22-13 against the spread, and this Pac-12 team, they saw their run to come to an end as well. Washington State, they fall to Iowa State by a count of 67-56. Washington State was just stuck in the mud in this one, 5 of 23 from three-point range, while Iowa State had Keshawn Gilbert, Taman Lipsby combined for 25 points, but in my opinion, more importantly, they combined for just 2 turnovers in this game. Iowa State wins that turnover battle by a count of 13-6, despite the fact that Washington State actually did win the rebound battle by a count of 34-32. Iowa State, they'll persevere. They get the job done. They're on to the Sweet 16 as well. For Kansas, they completely ran out of gas in the second half against Gonzaga. They were hitting some shots that maybe they don't normally hit. They get up 44-43 at the half, and then Gonzaga romps Kansas in the second half, 46-24 in that half. Gonzaga wins 89-68. As for Gonzaga, they do go 8 of 15 from three-point range, so they were hot in this game. And for Kansas, they go 9 of 22 from three-point range, but on their 2-point shots, they go just 16 out of 48. For Kansas, they actually do a solid job winning the turnover battle by a count of 10-8, and you had DeJuan Harris be able to go off for 11 assists, 10 points in this one, but for Gonzaga, the duo of Graham Ike, Anton Watson combines for 15 rebounds, 36 points, and Ryan Nembhard did have 5 turnovers, but he also had 12 assists. So you saw Gonzaga be able to get the job done. For North Carolina, they do as well. Michigan State got up early in this game. They had a 12-point lead in the first half, and then from there, things really just faded away. 85-69, North Carolina, they get the win, they get the cover. As for North Carolina, Harrison Ingram came up massive in this game. 17 points on 5 of 7 3-point shooting. North Carolina goes 19 of 23 at the free throw line. They do a nice job in this one of being able to win the turnover battle by a count of 11-5, as well as you had Ty Walker throwing their 24 points, but the rest of the Michigan State sort of roster, they just weren't able to give you a ton. Willie Call did throw in there 9 rebounds, so he was able to do a relatively solid job. But for Michigan State, it just did not have it on this day against North Carolina, and really none of the underdogs had it. All 8 favorites were able to get outright wins. Our DK Network write-up was NC State laying 6. This turned out to be a push. You had DQ Cole throwing there a 3 very, very late. He goes 1 of 5 from distance. That costed us on this one, but when you have a team go to overtime and you're laying points, I know they always say dogs go to die in overtime, but that said, you always feel fortunate that you don't take a loss. 79-73, the final for DJ Turn It Up Burns. He was amazing as he and Mohamed Diarra combined for 24 rebounds. Burns leads the way with 24 points. NC State, they go 9-26 from 3, and Jack Golke did all he could. 6 of 17 from the outside. He threw in there 22 points, 8 rebounds off the bench, and Trey Townsend, 30 points, 13 rebounds, but with those two combined for 52 points, that means that the rest of the roster had a combined 21 points. And for Oakland, give credit where credit is due. Only 7 turnovers in this game, but they didn't force NC State into any other. NC State just 8 turnovers, and with NC State winning the rebound battle, they win the game. How about Illinois and the overrun that they're on? 22 overs of 4 unders in their last 26 games. They absolutely destroyed Duquesne by a count of 89-63. Last game for Keith Dambrot as Duquesne's coach, as he's retiring at season's end. You had Jimmy Clark III tried to prolong his career with 14 points, but Duquesne got romped on the glass, losing that battle 35-28. They lose the turnover battle, and you had Darren Shannon go off for 30 points in this one, and Marcus Omas, 22 points, 7 assists. For Illinois, they shoot 59.5% from the floor, and for Duquesne, they just had a tough time being able to get good, efficient looks. So Duquesne's run is all over, and for Tennessee, they get the win, but Rick Barnes continues to have his struggles in the NCAA tournament as 62-58 was the final. Tennessee is able to get the job done as Tennessee goes to 3 of 25 from 3-point range in this one, but Dalton Knecht still found a way to connect on his scoring. 18 points, 9 rebounds, and for Texas, Dylan DeSue, he goes 2 of 7 from 3, but 4 of 18 from the floor for 12 points. Not necessarily going to call that a masterclass of efficiency. For Texas, they did a rough job of taking care of the ball in this one. 17 turnovers. Tennessee, they had 12 of their own, but if you're looking at Rick Barnes and what he's done against the spread, it has not necessarily been your friend. He is now 10-22 against the spread. I forget how long that has been, but he has been having a little bit of a tough time with it. I think that might have been since the beginning of the 2017 season. Don't quote me on that, but in his last 32 games in the NCAA tournament, 10-22 against the spread. That is relatively rough. And Mark Few, actually 22-30-1 against the spread as well. He hasn't necessarily had a lot of success, but he's been able to come through in some big spots. And prior to this game, Data Altman, in his most recent few NCAA tournaments, had been 16-6-1 against the spread. Prior to what we saw on Saturday, it goes down a notch because of double overtime and just the wildness and craziness. Speaking of wild and crazy as well, how about if we go to the CBI, where Chicago State, who last played a game on February 19th, and as I always say on this podcast, money is money. It doesn't matter if you're betting the NCAA tournament, the national title game, or the CBI. Chicago State, as about a 9-point underdog in some spots. When I was doing this podcast, it was 10. They get the outright win, 77-75. First time they had played a D1 opponent in over a month, and they control this game. Wesley Cardit was that guy in this one. He was able to supply the team with 30 big points. You saw UC San Diego be a little bit out of sorts in general, as for UC San Diego, you had Aniwana Tiat Jones, hopefully I said that correctly, supplied 17 points, and San Diego goes 10 of 19 from 3-point range compared to Chicago State's 10 of 30 from the outside. But for San Diego, 9 of 18 at the free throw line. They lose the turnover battle 11-8, and for Chicago State, they survive, they advance in the CBI, and Arkansas State has a big favorite of 12.5 points. They win, but they don't cover. 86-85 the final. So many more underdogs be able to cash in the CBI rather than than in the NCAA tournament. And for Arkansas State, they got up by a pretty healthy margin. I don't think at any time they were covering the north of 12-point spread, but for Bethune-Cookman, the way that they hold in there, Jacoby Eady was able to give you 19 points. So this is a Bethune-Cookman team that I think is on a little bit of the come-up. Arkansas State, they shoot north of 50% from floor, but lost that turnover battle by a count of 15-6. And Seattle, as a 12 to 12.5 point favorite, they're able to get the cover. This by a count of 79-66 as Cam Tyson continues his wonderful college basketball career. He supplies the team with 19 points, and for Delaware State, they were doomed on the turnover battle. They lose that one 17-14. Seattle was also able to win the rebound battle, and then out there in the NIT, Seton Hall trying to make a statement that they should have been in the NCAA tournament, and they're doing a good job of it. 72-58. They're able to take down North Texas, a North Texas team that ends the year 19-13 against the spread. So they made you some good money, but for Seton Hall, they were able to go 9-20 from three-point range. Katari Richmond, how about 11 points, 15 rebounds, 6 assists, while Trey Davis is able to throw in their 18 points. For Seton Hall, they did a nice job of being able to win that rebound battle as well by a count of 38-33. So Seton Hall, they move on in the NIT, and so does Ohio State. And ever since Ohio State hired on Jake Diebler, this has been a completely different team. 81-73, the final. They find a way to be able to get the job done. And for Ohio State, since Jake Diebler was able to take over at the helm, this team has covered, I believe now, all but 2 of their games, and I think that makes them 8-2 against the spread ever since he has taken over. For Ohio State, they only go 4 of 17 from three-point range, but how about Jamison Battle? He goes 17 of 18 at the free throw line, 21 points, 10 rebounds. For Virginia Tech, they lose the turnover battle 15-12, and for Virginia Tech, you did have Hunter Couture throw in their 18 points, goes 2 of 5 from 3. That's the team outside of him, won a nice hearty 3 of 16 from three-point range, and then you saw Cincinnati take down Bradley by a count of 74-57. A Bradley team that was pretty solid out there in the Missouri Valley Conference, but went just 5 of 23 from 3. Meanwhile, for Cincinnati, you had Jizzle James go out for 25 big points in this one. You've got a Cincinnati team as, some of these guys being out of the fold as of right now. Dede Thomas, I know for a fact, did not play in this game, but he find a way to persevere, get the job done. Victor Lakeen also dealing with injury, but Cincinnati, regardless, they find a way to be able to get the win and to be able to get the cover. And this is across everything that we've seen last week, so this includes the NIT, CBI, what have you, but in the last 7 days in college basketball, it has been very intriguing to take a look at the trends, as we've seen 40 overs, 35 unders with a push thrown in there as well, so over 8 is at about 53.5% in favorites, 42, 32, and 2 against the spread across all these tournaments, so they have really been making it some good money overall for the season. It has been a favorite season, hitting at 50.7% against the spread, 2,827, 2,748, and 100 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you're looking at overs, they're hitting at a 51% clip for the season, 2,859 and 2,750 to the under. So that's what we're seeing right now in college basketball, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's take a look at Sunday's action and the SEC with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14. Next right here on Coach Good Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. And we're back here in Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and we've got a great guest aboard as Blake Lovell. He does tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. It has been a fascinating year, to say the least, out there in the SEC, full of highs and lows, and here we are with Texas A&M in the round of 32, trying to atone for what we've been seeing out there in the southeastern part of the country, but those that know Blake know that he joins me to preview so many of these conferences during the offseason as well. You're able to find him on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And first things first, the conference that you cover the most, the SEC, it has come under some fire in the last few days, and I can't even say wrongfully so. When you've got Kentucky losing to Oakland, that's a relatively rough look, to say the least. But what have you just made out of these performances that we've seen from the SEC teams? Because, while a lot of people are going to be jumping on Kentucky for losing to Oakland, I thought the most stunning result was Auburn losing to Yale.
Yeah, I agree with that one, Greg. I think, as we always say, it's a tournament of matchups. And to be honest, I think when I first saw the bracket when it came out on Sunday, I looked at some of these matchups and I thought, all right, this is not a bad draw for the SEC. I think there, were a lot of ways you could look at it and say, okay, Kentucky's got a decent path. Certainly Auburn's got a tough path, but if there's anybody that can match up with UConn, it's them. Then you start to find scenarios for an Alabama and, teams like that to see if they can make a move. And then, I'll tell you, as soon as I started studying more of the matchups actually in depth, I started liking most of them less and less. The Kentucky-Oakland one, I don't know how many times I said, in a 48-hour span, the more I talked about it, the more I convinced myself that this was the kind of game that Kentucky could absolutely lose just because of the way they played all season. Yes, they can score, but they don't defend great, especially in the half court, and they don't play well when teams just completely dictate the tempo, and that's exactly what happened. And then, you looked at some of the other matchups. I thought South Carolina had a terrible matchup against Oregon. Turned out to be the case. The more I looked at Michigan State, Mississippi State, I thought, boy, Michigan State looks like a team that everybody's going to down just because it's not your vintage Tom Izzo team, but they're still probably better than Mississippi State. And you put them in that kind of one-game setting based on the matchups. And so the Auburn one was the disappointing one for sure. That's one of the matchups that I really never changed my opinion on. I thought that it was a good matchup for Auburn, but, 3 minutes into the game, right, it's like Jalen Williams gets hurt. Of course, he came back and played the rest of the way. Chad Baker-Mazara gets ejected. And it's like that almost set the tone for Auburn. And, you sit in there, look up, and it was kind of one of those things, Greg, where you're watching two games at once. We're sitting there at the same time watching Florida get beat at the buzzer, and then we're seeing Auburn essentially get beat at the buzzer against Yale. And the ultimate kind of whammy there for the SEC at a 1-5 start.
Yeah, that was absolutely brutal. Unfortunately, Alabama was able to help atone for that a little bit with the 109 points that they put up against Charleston. And Blake, this is a WAC conference I know that you've covered in the past before going to Southeastern 14. I know that you covered this conference quite a bit, and you've got a man on the flip side in Grand Canyon's Bryce Drew that knows all about the SEC. He was the coach over at Vanderbilt for a few years, went up against the likes of Nate Oates and company. What are you anticipating for this Alabama versus Grand Canyon game? One that involves a Grand Canyon team that is one of the best offensive teams in all of college basketball, and an Alabama team that is all offense and really no defense.
Yeah, as always, I think it's really, a matter of what are you getting from Alabama here defensively. And I know if you didn't watch the game from start to finish, you could probably look at the Charleston game and look at the score and say, well, Alabama didn't play defense again. But I think what's important to keep in mind is Alabama actually didn't play bad defense because they had only allowed 64 points with about 7.5 minutes to go, something like that, in that game. But then, Alabama's basically playing the walk-ons for the last almost half of the second half. And so, yeah, it was kind of one of those situations where Alabama did look better on that end. And we got to remember, too, Alabama's finally at full strength. And when Alabama was at full strength this year, that was the team that was kind of setting the pace in the SEC, being 8-1 and 11-2 and all that. And then they just had the injury situation with Latrell Wrightsell. Other people were getting injured too, right? And you had just guys missing games. And that really, I think, impacted the stretch run for Alabama. But that looked like the old team against Charleston. And I think what my concern would be for Grand Canyon here, despite the fact that they're going to have a home game because the crowd was just tremendous. We know that's just kind of always something that's been the case with them. Their fans will travel, and that was essentially a home game against St. Mary's. But, something we talked about when we did our preview of this game, Grand Canyon essentially now has to prepare for two completely different teams in a span of 2 days, right? St. Mary's plays one of the slowest paces, maybe the slowest pace in the country, if you really break it down and see how they play. A very defensive-oriented team. Now you've got to turn around and play a team that is the exact opposite in Alabama, who will play one of the fastest tempos in the country, a very offensive-oriented team. If Grand Canyon is going to advance here, and let's say they do pull the upset, they will have earned it, because to be able to, I think, pull off something like this where you're playing two styles this completely different in a span of, again, a couple days, and you manage to find a way to execute and win both of them, that tells me you're the kind of team that should be advancing to the Sweet 16.
Absolutely, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well while you are talking about preparing for two different styles. How much do you think the WAC has prepared this Grand Canyon team? Because if you take a look at the WAC, there are some of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, like Tarleton State is always super slow, super controlled. Stephen F. Austin, they play with their hair on fire, and I thought that was a big reason why Conference USA last year had all of their success with like Florida Atlantic making it to the Final Four. all those teams that made their IIT run is that night in, night out, you could see one of the fastest or slowest teams in all of college basketball. And I feel like if you were facing off against a team that would say, obviously they wouldn't get a 12 seed, but from like the Big Ten, for example, I really think that Big Ten team having to go through this sort of a swing, it would be playing so negatively against them. Meanwhile, for a team like Grand Canyon that sees a lot of styles out there in the WAC, I feel like they're much more prepared for it than most other teams would be.
Yeah, and I think, you could draw comparisons to like a team like UT Arlington, right? A team that I think 3-point wise, they play an up-tempo. That's kind of one of the things I was looking at. They're also a team that gets to the free throw line, which that's basically what Alabama does. Like we all know, kind of the Nate Oates philosophy at this point. They want to be able to shoot a lot of threes. They want to be able to get to the line. They don't want to take those low percentage shots anywhere else on the floor. When you look at some of the teams and the way they play, that certainly could be something that could really play into helping Bryce Drew and his staff get ready for this game. And it's so wild to think about, like that you do get these and this is why, to be honest with you, this is why when I saw Alabama's path and the more you studied it, I thought, man, this is one where you kind of look at the Charleston game. Everybody was calling them sort of Alabama light. And then you sort of looked at the possibilities with either a St. Mary's or a Grand Canyon matchup, and you felt okay for Alabama because it is one where if you look at the teams Alabama struggled the most against this season, it has really been the teams that are just like them. And I think what's interesting about this game with Grand Canyon, obviously they're going to play a style that's up-tempo too, but something that we know is this is a Grand Canyon team that is going to find a way to get to the free throw line. I'm curious because remember, we said, what's the weakness of this Alabama team? It is a team that will commit some fouls, and it is a team who struggles to just defend night in and night out on a good, basis. So if you get Alabama in foul trouble, all those kind of things, like anything can happen here. So yeah, they can definitely take away, I think, some of those games they played in conference play and really try to, tweak game plans that they had against teams like that. Like I said, whether it's UT Arlington, anybody else, it's very similar. Stephen F. Austin, you mentioned them, and try to kind of use some of those same things in this kind of game.
Yep, absolutely. I think that is going to be a fun one to take a look at as Blake Lovell, who does such a good job over at Southeastern 14, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. Now, unfortunately, we are doing this while we don't know the outcome of Texas versus Tennessee, just the nature of the NCAA tournament. I'd be surprised if Tennessee does not move on, and if Tennessee does not move on, there's going to be a lot of chatter around Rick Barnes. I feel very safe in saying that, but how about if we take a look at a rematch from a little bit earlier in the season that we're getting on Sunday, Texas A&M versus Houston, and this is a Houston team that I picked in my bracket to win the whole thing. I also had Auburn making a run to the national title game, so I feel very, very stupid for that.
I had the same as you. I had Houston and Auburn, so there you go.
All right, that makes me feel a little bit better, but I take a look at this game, and I think that Houston should be able to pull it out, but I go back to what we saw when these two teams first played in the month of, I believe it was December. That was a 4-point game on Houston's home floor, and I'm not sure how you view this game, but I don't think Texas A&M wins it, but I think that they could give Houston one of their biggest battles possible. If Houston makes a run, we could be looking back at this game being like, this is a game where they really had to survive and advance.
It is interesting to think about, but I actually like this matchup for Texas A&M. And of course, if we'd had this conversation a month ago, I've been like, if you put these two teams out there together in the rematch in February, Houston probably would have won by 30 based on the way that Texas A&M was playing. But that's what's happened since March. I was looking up Bart Torvik and all these other numbers. I think A&M's been the 6th best team in the country since March the 1st. And it's like, you think about that, if you're Houston, you're playing a 9 seed who, if you just want to, kind of exploit the numbers a little bit, could maybe be like a 2 seed since March the 1st. Like, that's how well they're playing. I think when you look at it from that standpoint, this team is different, certainly than they were when these two teams played back on December the 16th. Of course, they were without Tyrese Radford in that game. Wade Taylor had to go off. He scored 34. No one else scored over 7 for A&M, and yet they still only lost by 4 points. And, of course, Greg, all year long, we've talked about, hey, if for A&M, the offensive strategy may just need to be throw it off the backboard as hard as you can and then just go get the rebound, because that's really been where they've excelled, is being one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. But their percentages are starting to go up, and that is a scary thing. This team still ranks like 344th nationally in three-point percentage. And I think what's interesting about that is that they're still there despite now hitting 11 or more threes in 3 of their last 5 games. They shot 50% against Ole Miss. They shot 42% against Kentucky. They shot 57% against Nebraska. And even in the loss to Florida in that SEC semifinal, they still shot 38% there. it's like, do the law of averages come back around to where A&M goes 5 of 32 here or something against Houston? If that happens, they're going to get beat by double digits. But this team's really feeling it right now in terms of the way they're shooting the ball. And I think that's been the big difference. Manny Obaseki has absolutely been the difference for this team too, because he's given them that third option now where I think he scored in double figures in 8 straight games. Whereas before that, I want to say he only scored in double figures 2 or 3 times all season. He's been the difference. And when you have those 3 guys, we always say, Greg, guard play in March, they've got 3 guys who you can put on the perimeter that are making shots and really being difference makers. If they put that pressure on Houston here, we know it's the Houston team that, like we both said, we picked them to win the national championship, but they obviously don't have the depth that they had before some of these injuries. And something else we know too about A&M, we always laugh about it. There are not many teams in the country as good as A&M at making you play the way they want to play and getting to the free throw line. So what happens if Houston gets in foul trouble here? Because you look at that too, Houston fouled as much as anybody in terms of giving up free throws in the Big 12 this year. So there's a lot of things I think you look at with this matchup for Texas A&M, and there's a lot in their favor. So I would not be stunned anymore if the Aggies, if they keep playing like this, they have a really good chance to pull this upset.
Yep, and for Texas A&M, I don't know if they're going to quite duplicate 13 of 23 three-point shooting like they did in that game against Nebraska. That was just wild to say the least. But man, talk about a guy in Buzz Williams who just always seems to get the most out of his teams when it matters the most. And we shall see if that's going to be happening on Sunday as well. And Blake, we do have ourselves some very entertaining games that are going to be going down on Sunday. That Colorado Marquette game certainly catches my eye. You've got Clemson versus Baylor, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. And hey, we've got some NIT action as well. I know that Georgia is going to be hitting the floor as well. What else are you going to be watching for Sunday, whether that be the NCAA tournament or perhaps one of those NIT games?
Yeah, like you said, I think Colorado Marquette is certainly a game that I think is going to be fascinating because obviously we saw the triple digits for both teams in the Colorado-Florida game. And again, you kind of look at some of the Bart Torvik numbers in terms of how teams have played. Colorado's been one of the top, 15, 12 teams in the country over the past month or so. So certainly they're playing really well right now with all those guys who can step up and make big plays. So I'm really looking forward to that one. When I first said I thought either Florida or Colorado had a really decent shot against Marquette in that second round game. So I'm curious to see if Colorado can do that. That will be very interesting. And then I think, another one I certainly have my eye on is James Madison at Duke. That was a game where I was sort of unanimous. I've never felt probably stronger about a 5-12 as I did that one because I just thought James Madison was really just being sort of overlooked here. Obviously, it's a different challenge when you play Duke, but Mark Byington has just done a tremendous job with that team, and there's a reason they've won 32 games now. And I think the way, they defend, it's going to be very interesting to see how they kind of go in and how they kind of choose to sort of attack Duke here because that's going to be one that I think, is also very fascinating. But like you said, too, I think there are some other games. I'm curious to see what an Indiana State keeps doing, in an NIT type setting. There are coaches out there, as we know, Greg, that probably are going to get some looks for other jobs, whether it is Josh Schertz at Indiana State, whether that's an Amir Abdur-Rahim at South Florida. So guys like that, I'm curious to sort of see how their teams continue, if they continue to advance in those kind of, the non-NCAA games, because that could have a really big effect on how we start to see some of these coaching dominoes start to fall with some jobs out there.
Yep, it certainly could, and we've got a lot of intrigue to take a look at for Sunday. And hey, for those keeping track in the CBI, we've got Chicago State who won a game. That was very heartfelt, great to see, and it's always great to see you on the show, Blake. You do such a great job taking a look at this game of college basketball. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Like you said, you can find our SEC stuff, Southeastern 14. You can find us there, and a lot of SEC stuff we thought we'd be covering. Not as many teams left, but we'll keep covering the ones that are. And then, everything else college basketball related. You can follow me on Twitter at Blake Lovell.
Blake does an amazing job taking a look at this game of college basketball. And hey, sooner rather than later, we're going to be doing conference previews with Blake. Probably looking at the Atlantic Sun. And next time we catch Blake, perhaps it won't be Southeastern 14. It might be Southeastern insert number here. I think that they're going to be up to 16. Who knows? By the end of it, it might be Southeastern 47.5. That's the way that conference realignment is going at this point. But Blake does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. So big thanks to him for joining me on because it's now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank bets. Las Vegas. For Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by our good friend Blake Lovell. Does such great work over at Southeastern 14, as I was alluding to. That might not be Southeastern 14 very much longer with conference realignment, but he does an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every time he joins this show, always lends great insight. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at G_D1. We're going to be pretty much going in tournament order. This is going to start with the NCAA tournament games. From there, we go to the NIT games, and then we got the CBI from there. So lots of fun. No CIT action. That'll be back in our lives on Monday. So let's get things started with Northwestern versus UConn. This is 825, 826 on the card. UConn now a 14 to a 14.5 point favorite. Totals anywhere between 135.5 and 136. And fully recognize that we are going to witness Northwestern get completely romped on the glass, but I feel like we've just went a little bit too far here. I set my line at 12.5, and I thought I was setting a pretty aggressive line when I made this a 12.5. I'm going to be willing to take the 14 to 14.5 with Northwestern. I think that their outside shooting going to be able to do just enough to be able to keep them lively in this game. Gotta love what Boo Buie brings to the table for a Northwestern team that is one of the best in all of college basketball, being able to protect the ball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, a top 25 team in all of college basketball. Now, for Northwestern, Brooks Bryan-Arthur, the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, that's an issue. Northwestern outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate. UConn, they're one of the best rebounding teams in all of college basketball. Each of their top 5 scorers all give you at least 4.5 rebounds per game. Giant of the Earth, Donovan Clingan, gives you 7 boards, a little bit over 2 blocks per contest. You've got 6 assists, 7 rebounds, 15 points per game. Tristan Newton, who can give you a triple-double at any given time. Cam Spencer shoots 44.5% from 3 for a UConn team that is in the top 15 nationally in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per-possession basis. So have Alex Caravan that's really able to throw it in there from 3-point range. But do you like what I've been seeing on the perimeter for this Northwestern team? You've got Ryan Langford, who does a nice job being able to supply the seam with 12.5 points. Shoots 41.5% from 3-point range. It is a Northwestern team that has had their offense travel all season long. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they aren't quite on the level of UConn, but this has been a Northwestern team that, even with Ty Berry being out of the fold, they've still been able to maintain their high level of play on the offensive side of things. 48th in all of college basketball. It does drop off when they are away from home, but I do take a look at this spot with a Northwestern team that is outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. UConn, not necessarily a super duper up-tempo team as well, and I do think that's going to come down to execution. I do think that UConn going to be able to torch a Northwestern defense that is well outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're going to give up theirs, but I do think that in return, the UConn defense, the one real kryptonite that they do have is that they are going to give up a few threes. We did see Stetson really struggle with that approach, but Stetson does not have the same level of athletes in their game as we are going to be seeing from Northwestern in this one. I do think that Northwestern hits just enough shots to be able to hold in their UConn. So in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, you're a top 100 team overall, but in a roadside court setting, that does balloon up to about 34.2%. So I did set my total 140.5. I do like the over with UConn. Set them as a 12.5 point favorite, so we'll take the 14 plus and the overs. 827, 828 on the betting board. Duke is going to be playing host to James Madison. The Dukes, with an S on it, are an underdog of 7.5 points. So on this game is 148 to 148.5. I'm going to be willing to take the Dukes with an S. I said James Madison as an underdog of 3 points. I really think the Duke is going to be struggling with a James Madison team that's just so well-rounded. This James Madison team, in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per-possession basis, they are in the top 30 in all of college basketball in both respects. Now, it's a Duke team that's playing some pretty solid defense. There are a bunch that ranks in the top 30 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. In games played away from home, they allow opponents to shoot just 33.5% from the outside, so they've done a good job of locking it down there, but You know who does a better job of locking down from three-point range? That'd be James Madison, who entered into the NCAA tournament number 2 in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. What is going to be difficult for them is matching up with Kyle Filipowski. Kyle Filipowski, he's able to do a little bit of everything. He's able to give you 16-plus points per contest. He throws in there those 7 boards. He's able to pop it from three-point range. And for Duke, they've done a good job protecting the ball all season long. In terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, a top 25 team in the country. You've got so many guys that just contribute to the cause, like Therese Proctor, not necessarily an amazing scorer, but he gives you 3.5 assists and still does shoot 36.5% from three-point range. You've got Jeremy Roach along with James McCann. They combine to shoot about 41.5% from the outside between the two of them, 27.5 points per game, but James Madison has a really nice 8 to 9 man rotation in which you've got one dominant scorer in Terrence Edwards who gives you 17.5 points per game, but outside of that, Julian Wooden, Noah Friedel, these two guys, they give you combined 22 points. They combine to shoot about 39% from three-point range. TJ Bickerstaff, he's not quite what Duke has down low, but he's able to give you about a steal, 8.5 rebounds per game. He does a nice job with his overall versatility. Raekwon Horton is someone that has been able to step up, and James Madison, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are a top 40 team in all of college basketball. James Madison is right now riding the longest win streak in all of college basketball. Their style is very up-tempo. It's very difficult for teams to prepare for on the fly, and I do think that Duke, in the end, with their athletes, they get the job done, but I think that this is going to be a nip-and-tuck game. I set my line at 3. I'm going to be willing to take those points with James Madison and Duke. Not necessarily a super-duper up-tempo team, and with the way that James Madison is locking down on defense, I think that this could be a little bit of a lower-scoring affair. Did set my total 147. I like the under, and I'm going to be taking the points with our nation's 4th president in James Madison. Now, let's go to our DK Network right-up pick. This is 8:29, 8:30 on the card. Marquette, they are going to be playing against Colorado. This is going to be out there from Indianapolis, Indiana. Marquette is a 4-point favorite. Total on this game, 147 to 147.5. Set my line at 1. My DK Network write-up is taking the 4 with Colorado. I'm going to stay off the money line on this one just because I do think that this could very well be a one-possession game. These games, they just get very hairy late in games, but that said, I'm going to be willing to ride with Colorado. This Colorado team has a massive advantage down low. They're a top 12 team in all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate, and going into the weekend for Marquette, 286th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. You've got Oso Ogudero, who does a solid job down low. He's able to contribute about 7 rebounds per game, gives you 13.5 points per contest, but really, other than that, you don't have a lot down low for this Marquette team. Meanwhile, you have to go up against Colorado bunch in which you've got out of your top 5 scorers, 4 guys giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, and they bomb it from three-point range. Among players that have made at least 1 3 thus far this season that are going to be healthy and in the fold for this game, there are top 7 guys that made at least 1 3. All but one of them are shooting at least 39% from three-point range. They have been absolutely incredible with that respect. You've got KJ Simpson, who's got all sorts of versatility. He's not quite Tyler Kolek, but 19 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. Shoots 44% from three-point range. Javon Hadley, along Cody Williams, both be able to shoot north of 40% from 3 with about 11.5 points per contest. Well, you've had Tristan Da Silva also throwing their 16 points, 5 boards. You've just got a lot of versatility in general. Going against the Marquette team that it took them a half to be able to figure things out with Tyler Kolek back in the fold. They looked good in that second half against Western Kentucky, and Kolek right now leads all of college basketball in terms of assists per game. 7.8, 15 points per contest, and the one thing that Marquette does have going for them, they're good at forcing turnovers. Top 30 team in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They go up against a Colorado team that is a little bit of a kryptonite for them. Colorado, 12.7 turnovers per game. That is a bottom 125 mark in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis mark in all of college basketball, and I do like Cam Jones supplying this team with 17 points per game, but for Marquette, they shoot away from home about 34.5% from 3. And Colorado, who is 6th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, they do experience a drop-off when they're away from home. They go from shooting about 42.5% from three-point range at home down to about 36% away from home, but that is still superior to Marquette's mark. You've got David Joplin, who shoots the ball from 3, but CV Mitchell, guys like this, they have been a little bit hit or miss all season long. I think that the overall size with Eddie Lampkin being able to do a nice job down low, despite the fact that Colorado, they do turn the ball over a little bit too much, that's going to be able to keep them lively, and I think that Marquette is on big-time upset alert. So my write-up here is going to be taking the 4 with Colorado, and with regards to total, I did set mine at a 151. You've got a Colorado team that's really able to stroke it from three-point range. Lone trepidation is that this is is an early body clock game. This is one that is going to be starting at 9:10 Pacific time, so local time for Marquette, 11:10 at 10:10 for Colorado. But I do think that these teams put up some points. I like the over in my write-up. That is going to be taking the points with Colorado. 8:31, 8:32 on the betting board. Purdue and Utah State to battle from Indiana. And with Purdue, they are an 11 to an 11.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 148.5 and 149.5. As that Purdue has a 10.5 point favorite. I think we've gone just a hair too far here. I'm going to be willing to take the 11 to 11.5 with Utah State. While Giant of the Year Zach Edey is still going to have Purdue winning the rebound battle, I think that Utah State is going to fare better than most teams on the glass because they do have a great Osabor. He's been able to give you about 14 points, 9 plus rebounds per contest. Love his overall game for a Utah State team that they do a nice job of not getting out of sorts with things. They're a top 75 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, despite the fact that when away from home, they're only shooting about 32 to 33% from three-point range. You've got Darius Brown II, who's done a nice job being able to give out about 6 assists to 2 turnovers per contest. He himself shoots it relatively well from three-point range. Ian Martinez has been able to shoot nearly 40% from the outside, and we have been noticing this Purdue team has been a little bit hit or miss in terms of their defense. They actually do a really nice job of guarding the perimeter. They're 39th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but Utah State is better. Utah State is number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and everyone looks at Purdue and they talk about Zach Edey, giant of the earth, and what he's able to do down low. This has been a Purdue team that has become a top 5 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis because everyone on the floor is able to pop in from three-point range. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at each of your top 8 scorers for Purdue, every one of them shoot at least 35.7% from three-point range. All but 2 of them shoot at least 42.9% from three-point range. So Utah State being able to guard the perimeter like that is big. And outside of Zach Edey, the only other player that gives you really north of 4.1 rebounds per game is Braden Smith, who you can tell he's a little bit compromised by that injury. Looked relatively solid in that game against Grambling, and they didn't need him out there the full 40 minutes, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, 7.5 assists. He's been absolutely awesome, but that I do think is going to be able to help out Utah State just a little bit. The big key for Utah State is getting some of these ancillary scorers going. Can you get someone like a Josh Uduche to give you 10? He averages about 8.5 points per contest. Hasn't necessarily shot it well from three-point range for Utah State. Outside of Martinez and Darius Brown, you really don't have a lot of outside shooting for the team, but being able to get a little bit of something on someone like an Isaac Johnson, someone who's 7 feet tall, he's able to pop it from three-point range, has really come on strong with a combined 30 points, 8 boards in the last 2 games. They had 4 blocks in that game against CCU as well. So I do think that Utah State going to be able to do a relatively solid job against a Purdue team that has been very efficient on offense, but I think Purdue becomes a little bit more vulnerable because if you look at them since late February is a good moniker for this, they've been playing at a rate of about 5 possessions fewer per game than they did towards the beginning part of the season. I think that plays a little bit more into the hands of Utah State. As a result, I did set my total at 148.5, seeing 149, 149.5. I'm willing to ride with the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Utah State. 8:33, 8:34 on the betting board. It is Baylor playing against Clemson. This is going to be from Memphis, Tennessee, and with Clemson, they are an underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. So on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 145, and I do not want to lay anything more than 4.5 in this ordeal, but I'm going to be willing to lay 4.5 with Baylor. It's a bunch that has been one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, shooting as a collective just under 40% from the outside, and this Clemson unit just has a rough time in terms of being able to guard the three-point arc. Clemson outside the top 140 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're about 140th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It has been going up recently as they did a very nice job of holding down New Mexico. Prior to that game, they were outside the top 150, and that really did help out their rating, but I just attribute that to the Mountain West this far in the tournament being a big giant turd, and when you take a look at this Baylor team, I think that they're going to cause some big-time issues for a Clemson team that has been relatively solid on the glass. You've got a pair of teams that are in the top 40 with regards to rebound rate. Ian Shefflin is going to be the best overall rebounder in this game, about 10 points, 9.5 rebounds per game, and then PJ Hall gives you a bit of everything. 1.5 blocks, 6.5 rebounds, 18.5 points per contest, but it is a Clemson team that they very much are based around the offensive side of things. They really don't give you too much defensively, and for Baylor, they do a nice job of being able to rebound by committee. Jalen Bridges, Yves Missy, these 2 guys give you 5.7 rebounds per game, and then you've got Jacoby Walters able to hit the glass, 14 points, 4.5 boards, and he's really the only guy out of their top scorers that have made at least 1 3 this year, out of their top 5 guys that have made at least 1 3. He and Ray J. Dennis are the only two that are shooting below 41% from 3-point range. So they've been able to get good production there. They've been dealing with the Langston Love injury throughout the back half of the season. Did not play in round number 1. I don't think that he's going to be out there in this game as well, but you do have Jaden Nunn shooting about 45% from 3-point range. You've been able to get a little bit more recently out of Caleb Lohner. We saw him in that championship game against Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, be able to supply 12 points, 6 rebounds. He had 4 boards in that game against Colgate. I think that he could be able to come up a little bit big in this ordeal as well. And it is a Baylor team that they've got their struggles with regards to guarding the 3-point arc. They had a lot of opponents to shoot about 36% in a road or neutral court setting, but it is a Clemson team that outside Joe Girard, they can be very hit or miss from 3-point range. Girard has given you 13 plus points per contest. He has shot it very well at north of 42% from the outside. Then you've got Chase Hunter who's able to give you 12.5 points, but he's only been shooting about 32% from the outside as well. I think that the overall defense, especially the interior defense of Clemson, because while Clemson does a really good job of being able to hit the boards, be able to pull in there the rebounds, they don't do a good job of contesting shots from inside the arc. That's why they're 150th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that is going to nip them in the butt in this one, and that's why I'm going to be willing to ride with Baylor in this ordeal. I did set them as a 5-point favorite, so want to lay up to 4.5, and did set my total at a 145. Right now on the board, I'm seeing pretty much 145 across the board. This was a number that when it opened up, we were seeing more around a 145.5, and personally, if it becomes a situation between a 144.5 over and a 145.5 under, I would rather take the over on 144.5 rather than 145.5 under, because I do think that this can come down to some late game fouling. So looking there and looking to lay the 4.5 here with Baylor. 835, 836 on the betting board. It is Houston, and they're going to be playing against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, an underdog of anywhere between 9.5 to 10 points. Draws game between 134 and 134.5. I still think that Houston has a good shot of being able to win the national title game, and I do think that they are a very well-rounded team overall, but this does feel like it's going to be a very difficult matchup for them. I set my line at 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Texas A&M. Was alluding to it with Blake Lovell. Last time these two teams played, and they played in season. This happened on December 16th, which it's a while ago, but Texas A&M went on the road. They played within 4 points against Houston. In that game, Texas A&M shot 9 to 27 from 3. I don't think they're going to duplicate that. Texas A&M was as hot as lava from 3-point range in that game against Nebraska. Overall for the year, they're shooting 28.4% from distance, and this is a Houston team that is a top 2 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're one of the top rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. In terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they are 9th in the country. Like, this is an absolute machine, and I think that we're going to experience that fall off with Texas A&M, but in that game, Wade Taylor had 34 points, and that's got to be the blueprint here for Texas A&M. If Wade Taylor's able to go off for you, all bets are off, because he has been an absolute dynamo for this team recently. He's averaging 19 points, 3.5 boards, 4 assists per contest. He has went for at least 19 points in each of their last 5 games, had 25 big ones in that game against Nebraska. I mean, he is right now carrying the team. Outside that, you've got Manny Obaseki, who's able to pop it from 3 at a clip of about 40%. These are really the lone 2 guys on the roster, aside from Anderson Garcia, and shoot above 32% from 3-point range. Now, what Texas A&M does well, they don't turn the ball over. They only turn the ball over about 9.5 times per contest. Now you have to go up against a Houston team, though, that in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're a top 15 team in all of college basketball, and Houston themselves only turns the ball over about 9 times per game. The first time these two teams played, Houston only forced Texas A&M into 11 turnovers. I think they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job here, and I like the duo of LJ Cryer along Jamal Shead. Shead is your main point guard. He's able to throw out 6.5 assists. He's done a nice job of being able to up his scoring to about 13 points per game, while Cryer, he's that designated 3-point shooter, shooting 39% from the outside, 15 points, about a steal, and 2 assists per contest. You've got just tough customers in general, and Juwan Roberts and company, and while you don't have as big of rebounding numbers as Texas A&M, in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they're number 1 in all of college basketball, and among their top 7 scorers, you've got 5 of them that give you north of 4.7 rebounds per game, with Anderson Garcia is 9.2 leading the way. But I do think that Texas A&M is going to be able to keep it relatively close. They don't turn the ball over. They do a nice job of rebounding, and this is a Houston team that is just having difficulty winning by margin because they do play at such a slow, grimy style, and I think that both of these teams are really going to struggle from 3-point range. It is an A&M team that they do give up a few wide open looks from three-point range. It is a Texas A&M team that's outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 174th in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. So I do think that Easton, in the end, gets the job done, but can only set my line at a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with A&M, and I'm going to be looking at the under set my total at a 129.5. 837, 838 on the betting board. This is going to be from out there at Spokane Arena in Washington. Yale and San Diego State to battle. San Diego State, a 5 to a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 128.5 to 129. I think the smart kids hold in there. I say Yale is a 4-point underdog. Going to be willing to take the 5 with them. San Diego State doing an incredible job on defense. They are one of the best teams at guarding the arc in all of college basketball. 21st in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Yale on the other end, they're 192nd. But interesting note about Yale. They allow opponents to shoot north of 36% from three-point range at home. That falls to about 33.1% in a road/neutral court setting. And for San Diego State, it's not like they're lighting it up with regards to their three-point shooting. You've got a San Diego State unit that has Lamont Butler, along with Darion Trammell, back from that national title team of last season, but these two guys are combining for 17 points per contest. They're both shooting below 31.5% from three-point range. Yeah, they do a nice job being able to dish out the ball. These two guys have been able to combine for about 6 assists per contest. You've got Jaden Ledee, who's been able to give you 21.5 points, 8.5 boards, shoots 42.5% from the outside. I do like his overall game. And then Reese Waters, along with Micah Parrish, these are a pair of guys that are able to give you a little bit more from the perimeter, but Parrish is only shooting about 30% from three himself. It's all about the defense for San Diego State, a San Diego State team that, if you take a look at things, they have given up at least 68 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Very, very misleading. One of those games against a very up-tempo New Mexico team, and then 2 of those games go to overtime. I do think that San Diego State going to do a nice job of really making this a bit of a slog, a bit more of a grimy game against a Yale team that they do a nice job protecting the ball. They only turn the ball over about 9 times per contest. Not an up-tempo team. 291st in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and for Yale, they're about 72nd in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Love what Danny Wolf brings to the table. A true 7-footer that's able to give you 9.5 boards, 14.5 points on 33% three-point shooting, which goes up to more like 35.5% when he's away from home. And then John Polidikis, he's been able to do a nice job, give you about 13.5 points. He's been able to shoot about 40% from the outside, while August Mahoney is your main three-point shooter at 46% from the outside. It's a very well-balanced Yale team. You've got 5-stepper guys that give you at least 10.5 points per contest. Not a lot of depth outside that. You'd like to see someone like Casey Simmons be able to step up a little bit more, play very sparingly in that game against Auburn. But I do think that Yale going to be able to hold in there. It's a Yale team that ranks in the top 75 nationally with regards to rebound rate. San Diego State has a little bit of an edge here with Ledee, but I do think that Yale going to do a nice job of holding in there in a game that I think is going to be very nip and tuck, despite the fact that Yale themselves has gotten to at least 69 points in 4 of their last 5 games, but defense has stepped up in a big way for them as well. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Yale, set them as a 4-point dog, set my total 128. I also do like this total under 839, 840 is the last NCAA tournament game before we hit the NIT, as it is Grand Canyon and Alabama doing battle from Washington, and Alabama is a favorite of 6 points. Your total between 168.5 and 169. I'm the schmuck that's going to try the under again in an Alabama game. I set my total at 165.5. With Grand Canyon, I was alluding to it with Blake Lovell. This team has seen it all. They have seen super up-tempo teams. They have seen super slow teams. I think that the WAC has actually prepared them very well for this moment, and I think Grand Canyon holds in there. Set them as a 3.5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Grand Canyon. On my bracket, I actually did advance them to the Sweet 16. I actually like what I saw out of Alabama in that first-round game, so I can't quite get there outright on the money line with regards to my bet, but you take a look at this Alabama team, and they're still porous with regards to their defense, and I tried to put that as politely as possible. 264th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and in games played away from home, they allow 19.3 points more per 100 possessions rather than at home. And if you look at the points allowed on a per possession basis in a roadside-neutral court setting, Alabama is actually a bottom 15 team in all of college basketball. They go up against the Grand Canyon team that's 5th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That goes up to 4th in a roadside-neutral court setting. For Grand Canyon, you do have a do-it-all player in Tyon Grant Foster. 19 points, 6 boards, a steal and a half, a block and a half per contest. Gabe McLaughlin, 7.5 rebounds, 13 points per game. And oh yeah, by the way, Grand Canyon, they've got the rebounding advantage in this game as well. Alabama is actually not the world's worst rebounding team, though. Grant Nelson is really the lone guy on the roster that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, but they just don't compare to what you're able to get out of Grand Canyon, a team with a whole bunch of size. Grand Canyon, 37th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Alabama is actually 49th with that regard, but you've got on top of Mr. McLaughlin, someone in Duke Brennan who's able to give you 7.6 rebounds per game. Luke Ward is able to give you a little bit of something. They've went away quite a bit from Sidney Curry, but he's someone that began his career over at Louisville. If you need a few minutes out of someone like him, perhaps you go to him, but he has been out of the fold the last few games, so I don't think that we're going to be seeing too much out of him, but you've got that option if needed for Grand Canyon. They also do a nice job being able to generate north of 8 steals per contest, going up against an Alabama team that they do a solid job of taking care of the ball and considering their tempo. One of the fastest teams in all of college basketball, 12 turnovers per game with Mark Sears being able to shoot 43.5% from three-point range, 21.5 points per contest, and it's an Alabama team that they are not shy to shoot the three. They are a top 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. It's an Alabama offense that has been able to travel as well. 4th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in a roadside shoot court setting. But for Alabama, while they shoot 39.2% from three-point range at home, that does fall off to about 34.7% in a road or neutral court setting. And this is a Grand Canyon team that does a good job of being able to guard the three-pointer. Grand Canyon, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they are 92nd in all of college basketball, but what you want to know, away from home, Grand Canyon allowing opponents to shoot 30.4% from three-point range. That's a top 20 mark in all of college basketball. That'll keep them lively, and that'll keep the scoring down just a little bit in this one. Semi-total 165.5. I like the under, and I like the points with Grand Canyon. Set them as a 3.5-point underdog. Now let's set these NIT games, starting with 8:41, 8:42 on the card. It is Indiana State, and they are going to be playing up against Minnesota. Minnesota, the road team, is a underdog of 7.5 points. So now this game between 163 and 163.5. Semi-line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Minnesota. Now, with Minnesota, the defense, it does drop off quite a bit when they're away from home. They are giving up north of 20 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court setting rather than at home. Gotta have your concerns there, but for Minnesota, they do a nice job of being able to dole out the ball with having Elijah Hawkins, he transferred from Howard, giving you 7.7 assists per game. That's number 2 in all of college basketball. Supplies the team with about 9.5 points per contest. The Minnesota offense really doesn't take too much of a drop off when they're away from home as well. So that's an interesting aspect to this. Got an Indiana State team as a top 25 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. 3 separate guys that give you at least 16 points per contest. Ryan Conwell, Isaac Swope, along with Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar himself, Robbie Avila. Avila, 17 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists, shoots 39% from three-point range, and Indiana State as a whole, they shoot 38.5% from the outside against a Minnesota team that they are going to give up the arc a little bit. Minnesota, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they allow opponents to shoot 39.6% when they're away from home. Not like this Indiana State team is necessarily some sort of stalwart with their three-point shooting defense as well, 143rd in all of college basketball with this regard. And it is a Minnesota team that does have Dawson Garcia down low, who's able to give you 7 rebounds per game. If there is someone that's going to be able to hang with Avila, it's going to be him. Now that's going to free up things for the rest of the guards on the team. You've been able to have Julian Larry do a nice job giving the team nearly 5 assists per contest. Xavier Bledson is someone that's got all sorts of versatility as well. And for Larry, he shoots 47.5% from three-point for an Indiana State team that they do a nice job on the inside as well. They shoot over 50% overall as a team from the floor. But I do think that Minnesota is going to be able to do a relatively solid job of hanging in there on the glass. It is an Indiana State team that, looking at their overall rebound rate, they're clocking in about 42nd in all of college basketball. Minnesota, they're a step below that. They're checking in more around about 100th, but I do think that with having someone like Dawson Garcia in there, along with having some nice ancillary pieces as well, you've been able to get about 10 points per contest out of Cam Christie, along with Pharrell Payne. These are 2 guys that are able to pop in from three-point range. It's a Minnesota team that I think is going to be able to find a way to hold in there, and it's a Minnesota team that, with regards to their defense, it has been a little bit all over the place, but has given up 72 points for fewer throughout the last 5 games. Meanwhile, you do have an Indiana State team that has given up at least 77 points in 3 out of their last 5 as well. So I do think that you get a nice up and down affair. Did somebody total 162.5? This is a little bit of an earlier game. It's going to be played at more like 1 o'clock local time. So I did buck down my total just a little bit on that one. So here at a 163, I think we've gone a little bit too far looking at the under. And set my line at 6.5. So we'll take the 7+ here with Minnesota to go along with the under. 843, 844 on the betting board. Wake Forest plays us at Georgia. Georgia is an underdog of 9 to 9.5 points on this game between 157.5 and 158. And with Wake Forest, I did set them as a favorite of 9 points at a 9.5. That is my buy point on Georgia. Now, Georgia has been rough in terms of their defense, to say the least. They are well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a Wake Forest team that is just so vastly different when they're at home rather than on the road. For Wake Forest, they're 36th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they're averaging 16.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside court setting. And in terms of their three-point shooting numbers, Wake Forest, they shoot 32.4% from three-point range when they're away from home. They shoot 41.4% from three-point range when they're at home. Georgia, a little bit more of a consistent team. They shoot about 33.5% from three-point range at home. This actually goes up to 33.9% in a roadside court setting. You've got RJ Melendez, really a guy that doesn't master anything, but he does everything okay. He gives you like 9 points, 4 boards. He pops a few threes for a Georgia team that is about 185th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And the key for this Georgia team, can they do an okay job of being able to guard the three-pointer, because they are about 145th in all of college basketball in this regard. And Wake Forest, when they've been at home, they've done a nice job of being able to guard teams from three. They allow opponents to shoot overall about 32.4% from distance, 32.9% when they are at home, so that's going to help them out. But Jabri Abdul-Rahim, Alonzo Thomason, these two guys have been able to combine for between about 26 to 25.5 points per contest. They've done a nice job of just being able to give you some consistency, while Justin Hill has been more of your main facilitator with 3 assists per game. And the big fear for Wake Forest, the depth. You don't have a lot of guys they're able to look to off the bench. Efton Reed, Austin Carr, they do a nice job combining for about 14.5 rebounds per contest. With Carr, he's able to give you 13 points per contest. And each of your top 4 scorers for this Wake Forest team, Carr, Cam Mildreth, Hunter Salas, along Kevin Miller, the nickname Boopy, I don't know where that came from, but they all shoot at least 36% from three-point range, with Salas being your main man, putting in their 18 points per game. But they really have a 6-man rotation, and with Georgia, they do play a little bit more of an up-tempo brand of basketball, and I do think that can wear on this Wake Forest team just a little bit. And we did see these two teams play a little bit earlier in the season. Georgia won that game at home 80-77. Now, that's ancient history. That happened in November, so I don't take too much from that, but I do think that we're going to see a similar up-and-down game. I did set my total 159. I'm going to be looking at the over. And for Georgia, I do think that revenge is going to be had on them, not to quite the extent of 9.5. I set my line at 9, so we'll take the 9.5 to go along the over. 845, 846 on the betting board. South Florida is going to be playing us VCU, and VCU, a underdog of 3 points, seeing a 2.5 out there as well. 142.5 to 144 is your total, and for South Florida, I did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. South Florida has done a really good job with their defense. They're one of the best perimeter defenses in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. 37th in all of college basketball. VCU is able to counter that, though. They are 36th in all of college basketball in opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and they actually do a better job of guarding the arc away from home rather than at home. They allow opponents to shoot 30.8% from three-point range away from home, but the big key for this VCU team is what sort of offense are you going to be able to get in this game, and are these guys going to be able to protect the ball? Because it has been a VCU team that has been turning the ball over darn near 12 to 12.5 times per contest. I like what you're able to get out of Max Scholge. He's been the main constant on a VCU team that has been banged up all season. 14 points, 4.5 boards, shoots 42% from three-point range, and it's a rare team that has 3 separate guys that average north of 3 assists per contest. Sean Bearsall, Zeb Jackson, Scholge, who I mentioned before, are all give you at least 3.4 assists per contest, but Jackson has been quite a bit banged up, was able to play in that game against Villanova, so should be all good to go here, but you do have the fear with those turnovers, and even though VCU is a top 75 team in the country in terms of rebound rate, you only have one guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.7 rebounds per game. Toby Lowell, who's been able to give you 8 points, 6 boards per contest. South Florida outside the top 140 with regards to the rebound rate, but gotta love what Keshawn Pryor's been able to bring you down low. 13 points, 8 boards, shoots about 35.5% from 3, and it's a South Florida team that overall for the season they shoot 36.6% from 3-point range, but if you look from the month of December on, they're shooting more like 38.5% from 3-point range. Chris Youngblood, Selton Miguel, they've been able to combine for 30 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot about 41% from 3-point range. You've got relatively good facilitation with about 3 assists, 7 points per game. Jaden Reed, who's been able to shoot 47% from 3, he's become a little bit more of an aggressive player on the offensive side of things as the season has went along. And for South Florida, they do turn the ball over just 10.5 times per contest. Both of these teams not really playing at warp speed or anything like that. VCU really bogging things down. They're outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game. It's a South Florida team that they're not super duper fast, they're not super duper slow, about 158th in the country with this regard. So interesting spot here. I do think South Florida in the end, able to get the job done on their home floor. I did set them as a 4.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. So I'm total 134.5. I really don't see where this 144 number is coming from. I think that this is set way too high. We saw VCU put the clamps down in game number 1 of the NIT. I think we're going to see something similar. So I like the under, and I do like South Florida willing to lay up to 4 with them. 847, 848 on the betting board. Iowa hits the road to face off against Utah. Utah is a favorite of 5 points. Total on this game is 166 to 165.5, and it's a circumstance where I set my total at 164.5. I think we've gone just a hair too far. I'm going to be taking a look at this total under. The biggest reason why this Utah team has been so vastly different with their defense when they've been at home rather than when they've been away from home, and you've got an Iowa team that they've got some pretty demonstrative home and road splits with regards to their offense. Now, for Iowa, the home and road splits on offense aren't as bad this year as they were last year. Last year, they were massive, but they're still scoring about 8 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they are a team that ranks 22nd in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Utah more around about 93rd, and they average 12.3 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shooting guard setting. But for Utah, these defensive numbers from home to road, they just aren't even comparable. As Utah overall for the season in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're checking in 90th in all of college basketball, but they give up 17.4 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. And to have an Iowa team that's done one thing well on defense, away from home, they're an above average team in terms of being able to guard the 3-point arc in the top 150 in terms of road opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. That said, they're relatively rough in terms of their defense. You do have Peyton Samford, Tony Perkins, who are able to supply the team with about 31 points per contest. Perkins has done a nice job doling out the ball. 4.7 assists per game. Iowa, top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. But this isn't an amazing jump shooting team. You do get a 41% 3-point shooter in Josh Jicks, who's able to give you about 9 points per contest, but past that can be a little bit hit or miss. You've got guys like Owen Freeman, Ben Krikke, who do a nice job down low. They're providing about 24.5 points in that neighborhood, about 11 rebounds per game, but I do think that Brandon Carlson is going to be able to take them to task. Carlson, a true 7-footer, is able to give you 17 points, 7 boards. He shoots it well from 3-point range, while Utah has also been able to get a nice shot in the arm from their point guard, Davion Smith. Was banged up towards the beginning part of the season, has really been able to come on strong. He's given the team 5+ assists in 4 of the team's last 5 games. Overall for the season, averaging about 6.8 assists per contest. His assists per game is one of the top marks in all of college basketball. He shoots about 33% from 3-point range overall, but that goes up to about 36.7% from the outside when he's away from home. And for Utah overall, they do shoot about 36% from 3. Now, you do have trepidation with this Utah team, and it's part of the reason why I did take this total under. They shoot 65% at the free throw line. Each of their top 4 scorers shoot below 72% at the charity stripe. As a matter of fact, Cole Banjaba, who shoots 75.5% at the free throw line, he is the only guy that is averaging north of 1.5 points per game that shoots above 72% at the free throw line. So that is a little bit of an issue, but Utah should be able to really manhandle things on the glass. It's an Iowa bunch that in terms of their overall rebound rate, they just have not been impressive despite having guys like Krikke and company 222nd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it is a Utah team that with their balanced rebounding, they are checking in more around 90th in all of college basketball. So to set my line at 6.5, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Utah, and did set my total at 164.5. I do think that we went a little bit too far because Utah does a good job with their defense at home. So I'm going to have the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Utah. 849, 850 is the last NIT game. UNLV plays us to Boston College. Boston College is an underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. Your total on this game, it is anywhere between 143.5 to 144, and I set my line at 2. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Boston College. I just don't know if UNLV is going to be able to do a nice job of being able to match up with Quentin Post, who's got one of the best overall just skill sets they're able to find in a player outside the NCAA tournament. 17 points, 8 boards, 3 assists as a true 7-footer, shooting 43.5% from 3. For a Boston College team as a collective, they shoot 36% from the outside. Now, what has been the undoing for Boston College? Their perimeter defense. Boston College has been allowing opponents to shoot right around about 34.5% from 3-point range overall, but in a road or neutral court environment, that actually goes down to about 32%, and they go up against a UNLV team that has been far from magnificent in terms of their overall defense. Now, they do a nice job of being able to lock it down from 3-point range, 57th in the country with that regard. Actually, a lot of opponents, they shoot better from 3-point range when they're at home rather than when they are on the road, but that said, this is a UNLV team, and in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're about 154th in all of college basketball, very comparable to what you're going to get on this Boston College team. It was about 187th, but Boston College only allowed allowing about 1.9 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home. Now for UNLV, what I love for this team is Zedrin Thomas, the main point guard who's been able to give you 13 plus points per contest. He's been able to throw in there about 6 assists per game. He has really been able to elevate this team, and as a result, UNLV back in the top 120 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but UNLV also averages 3.8 points per 100 possessions fewer at home rather than away from home. They've been dealing with some injuries to the Boone brothers recently as well. That has been a bit of an issue. Keelan Boone should be good to go in this one. He's been able to be the main rebounder with about 7 rebounds per game. Caleb Boone has been out of the fold recently, so that's something to watch out for a UNLV team that they only do shoot about 33% from three-point range. Outside of Thomas, who shoots 35.9% from three-point range, really nobody else shoots above 35.5% from the outside for the team. Luis Rodriguez is a nice Swiss Army knife guy, 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but I do think the Boston College, with the way that they protect the ball, top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, with old wacky Zachy, Jaden Zachary giving you 4.5 assists per contest, or in there 11.5 points, shoots 40% from three, should be able to keep the team lively against a UNLV team that's outside the top 150 in terms of rebound rate. I did set UNLV as a 2-point favorite, so going to be willing to take the 4.5 to 5 here with Boston College, and did set my total 142. UNLV has been well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. This Boston College team actually travels quite well with their defense, so I'm looking at the over and the points with Boston College. Now let's hit our 4 CBI games. These are all out there in Daytona Beach, Florida from the Ocean Center. 8:53, 8:54, Northern Colorado, and Cleveland State to battle. Cleveland State, a favorite of 1.5 to 2 points. So last game between 158.5 and 159, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under. I did set this total more at a 154.5. Now Northern Colorado, they run it, they gun it, they are outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, they are 53rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they really don't experience too much of a fall-off when they're away from home. In a road or neutral court setting, Northern Colorado won the top 30 most efficient offenses in all of college basketball, but with Cleveland State, I think that they're going to be able to bog them down a little bit more in this game. This is also a body clock game. This is an 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time start, so that is going to be hurting this Northern Colorado team just a little bit, on top of the fact that you've got a team that does a relatively good job of being able to generate these turnovers in Cleveland State. Cleveland State has Tristan Enaruna, who's able to do a really nice job giving you 16 points, 6 boards. He's able to be a relatively solid 3-point shooter for a Cleveland State team that in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are a top 75 team in all of college basketball in Northern Colorado. They really don't force any turnovers whatsoever. They are not going to be turning up the heat whatsoever as Northern Colorado. They rank 279th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for Cleveland State, they're going to do a nice job of being able to guard that 3-point arc as well. Cleveland State, in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, 19th in all of college basketball. Northern Colorado, they're not 19th. They're checking in more around 3rd. Now, I will say this is a Cleveland State team that's not amazing with their 3-point shooting, and it is a Cleveland State team that they shoot less than 70% at the free throw line as a collective, so you do have to have your trepidations there, but that said, with Cleveland State, you do have a lot of guys that do a nice job of being able to support their main man in Enaruna, as you've got Drew Lauder, Tay Williams combining for about 24.5 points per contest. Williams is able to give you about 6 boards per contest. It is a bunch in Cleveland State that has been able to do a nice job of being able to get a little bit of something down low of Dylan Arndt as well. He's been able to give you a little bit over a block per game. Meanwhile, Northern Colorado, they've got the best player out there on the floor. That would be St. Thomas. St. Thomas has been able to supply 19.5 points, 9.8 boards, 4.2 assists, 1.5 steals per game. And then you've got DeJure Reeves, who's been able to shoot a ball from 3-point range, 38% from the outside. For Northern Colorado, even though they do play a little bit more up-tempo, they only do turn the ball over about 11 times per game. Big thanks to Jerron Riley, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists to less than 2 turnovers per game for doing a nice job on that front. But it is a little bit of a top-heavy team. You'd like to see a little bit more out of someone like Zach Block, who's been able to give you about 43% 3-point shooting on 6 points per contest. And I do think that in the end, Cleveland State, even though they do have some shooting follies, to say the least, they're going to be able to find a way to pull this one out. And for Cleveland State to enter, having given up 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, I do think that they're going to be able to slow things down. I did set Cleveland State as a favorite of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce, and set my total 154.5. I also like this total under 855, 856 on the betting board. Presbyterian and Montana do battle from the great state of Florida. Montana is up to a 7.5 point favorite. Total between 149 to 150. I set Montana as a favorite of 8.5 points. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Presbyterian got off to a really nice start to the season with that win over Vanderbilt, which aged like milk because Vanderbilt was not very good this season. And take a look at this Presbyterian team. There's not a ton to necessarily love. They've got a really good three-point shooter who's been able to shoot it at about 40.5% from three-point range. It's Samaje Teal, who gives you about 13 points per contest, but he is the only other top four scorers that shoots about 31.5% from the outside for this Presbyterian team as well. In a coverage situation, they shoot 66.5% at the charity stripe. Marcus Barnett has been able to give you 14.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but Presbyterian is going to get manhandled on the glass. They don't have a single guy that gives you an earth of 5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Montana, Lovell has been able to give you about 6 to 7 rebounds per game. It's a Montana team that, I'm not saying that they're amazing on the glass by any stretch of the imagination, but you know what, 157th in terms of their rebound rate. That compares to Presbyterian, the Blue Hosts, who are right around about 244th, and for Montana, this has actually been a really efficient offense headlined by Ada Moody. Moody has been in the mood to be able to give you some points, 16.5 points, shoots 38.5% from 3 points. For a Montana team that overall, they shoot about 35.5% from the outside. They keep things clean with only about 10 turnovers per contest. Presbyterian more around about 11.5 turnovers per game, as Montana is 34th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And you go up against the Blue Host team that's more around 199th in the country with this regard. Deshaun Thomas, his versatility, 12 points, 5.5 boards, letting it fly 40% from 3 points. I do think that that's going to take it out of a Presbyterian team that they really don't do a great job with regards to their ball pressure in general. And I will say, for a Presbyterian, they come in good form with their defense. They have given up now 65 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, 74 points or fewer in each of the last 4. And credit where credit is due. It's a Montana team that's been a little bit up and down with their defense, but 65 points or fewer surrendered in 3 out of their last 5 games. And for Montana, even though they've been very efficient with their offense, it's not like they're playing super duper up tempo. Montana 3 and 4th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You got a Presbyterian team that is pretty lethargic and methodical as well. Presbyterian about 194th in all of college basketball. So I do think that there's going to be efficiency, but there's not going to be a ton of possessions, which is why I set my total 146.5. I do like this total under with Montana. Willing to lay up to 8 with them. 857, 858 on the betting board. Little Rock is going to be playing against Fairfield. The Sags of Fairfield are a 1-point underdog. Totals between 152.5 and 154.5. I made Fairfield the 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. This is year number 1 for Fairfield with their coaching regime, and I think that they want to send a statement in this tournament. You do want to be looking at a little bit of motivational spot, and I do think that this is a big one for a Fairfield team that where they're going to get outgunned is down low. Fairfield outside the top 225 in terms of their rebound rate, but for Fairfield, this team has really been able to elevate in terms of their offense. They're going to need to guard the arc a little bit better in a road or neutral court setting. They do allow opponents to shoot about 34.9% from the outside. They do go up against a Little Rock team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're 86th in all of college basketball. But this is also a Fairfield team that has been able to ascend with their offense as well. Under the Jay Young tutelage, they were not very good on offense, to say the least. They're now a top 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And what really helps out Fairfield in this ordeal, their overall three-point shooting. You take a look at the way that Fairfield has shot the ball from 3-point range in a roadside neutral court setting. It has been one of the best in all of college basketball. When they leave home, they all of a sudden, for some reason, they decide to get hot from 3-point range. As overall, as a team, they shoot about 36.5% from 3. This is still right around about 36.2% in a roadside neutral court setting, going up against a Little Rock team that has been able to do a solid job of being able to guard the arc. Away from home, they allow opponents to shoot about 33.2% from 3-point range, but for Fairfield, Jasper Floyd, I think, is really going to be able to come up big for this team. Not the best scorer for the team. He's their number 4 scorer, but he's able to give you about 9.5 points, throws in there 5 to 6 rebounds, 5 assists, multiple steals per game. Very well-rounded player. Going against a Little Rock team that, after like the fact that you've got KK Robinson coupled with Jameer Chaplin out there in the backcourt, giving you combined about 30.5 points, 12 boards for Robinson, 4 assists on about 32% 3-point shooting. It's a Little Rock team that they're not necessarily amazing with their 3-point shooting. They shoot about 34% from the outside overall, and this drops off to about 31% when they're in a roadside shoot court setting. They do have some just good sheer depth in terms of rebounding. Their top 6 scorers, you've got 5 guys that give you at least 4.8 rebounds per game. Really nobody that gives you, though, north of 6.5 rebounds per game in Chaplin, but I like what Caleb Fields is able to provide for this Fairfield team with about 16 points per contest, and Bryson Goodine, 14 points on 46.5% 3-point shooting. It's a Fairfield team that they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, and I think that that is going to be a big key for this game. Just the turnover battle in general. You've got a Fairfield team that, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're a top 85 team in all of college basketball, being able to take care of the ball. Meanwhile, if you look at turnovers turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This has also been a Fairfield team that has done a nice job of being able to force those turnovers, while Little Rock outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in a road/court setting. Fairfield, they're a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis as both home and road, but even on the road, that is still a top 40 mark in all of college basketball. I think that leads Fairfield to victory. So, did set Fairfield as a favorite of 3 points. I like them on the money line. Did set by total 153. This is a game where I think it's going to be relatively nip and tuck, and we saw the opener at a 152.5. I'm seeing one rogue 154.5 out there, but mostly seeing 152.5 to 153. I like the 152.5 over since it's more of the market number, and I'm willing to take Fairfield on the money line, and we wrap things up with 859, 860 on the card. Quinnipiac is going to be playing against Evansville. Evansville out there in Florida is a 2.5 to 3 point underdog. Total on this game is 151.5. It's a circumstance where I did set Quinnipiac as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Ben Humer-Ricketts has been able to do a nice job of being able to be the headline scorer for this Evansville team, right around about 14.5 points per contest, and you could tell that when he was out of the fold towards the middle half of the season, this was an Evansville team that they just so badly needed him, as he's done a nice job of just being able to carry a team that outside of him, it's one of those like wholes greater than some of its parts sort of teams. You've got Yancy Toumi, who comes over from France, about 11 points, 6.5 boards. He's been able to give you a little bit of something down low, but it doesn't really give you a lot of shot blocking. This Evansville team is just not very strong in the paint in general, and it's also an Evansville team that they don't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to generate turnovers as well. They're about 175th in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Quinnipiac team that is more around about 132nd with that regard, and it's a Quinnipiac team that, even though defense is not necessarily the true forte of this team, they've still been a top 100 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Evansville is well outside the top 200 with Quinnipiac. They've done a relatively solid job of being able to lock down from 3-point range away from home. 32.7% is what opponents shoot from 3-point range in a road/court setting against them. Meanwhile, Evansville, they allow opponents to shoot about 37% from the outside against them in a road or neutral court setting, and you just don't have a lot of outside shooting outside of Humer-Ricketts. Your next top 6 scorers all shoot 35.2% or less from 3-point range, with really nobody other than Chuck Bailey shooting above 31.5% from the outside. He contributes about 8.5 points per contest. Meanwhile, for Quinnipiac, Matt Bolanek has been able to give you about 18 points per contest, shoots 36% from 3-point range, and Quinnipiac should be able to win the battle on the glass with Amari Tice, Paul Otinho combining for about 24.5 points. They've done a nice job being able to give you, between the two of them, 14 rebounds per contest, as Quinnipiac, in terms of their overall rebound rate, this team does rank in the top 85 in all of college basketball. They're clocking in 74th to be exact, and for Evansville, they are checking in more around 274th in all of college basketball. Outside of Toomey, you don't have a ton there, and Savion Lewis is in the top 5 nationally in terms of assists per game for this Quinnipiac team. 7.5 assists to 3 turnovers per contest, shoots 41.5% from the outside, and in a late game falling situation, Quinnipiac, they shoot 78% the free throw line, top 20 mark in all of college basketball. I think that they're going to be able to wear down an Evansville team that just has a bunch of guys that have a little bit of versatility, but they don't really ascend and pop the way that Quinnipiac does, and I do think that Evansville is going to lose the battle on the glass. I did set my line at 6.5, going to be willing to lay with Quinnipiac, and did set my total at a 154.5 as well. It's a Quinnipiac team that's really been exploding with their offense at Evansville. It's not been holding up on defense, so I'm looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay with Quinnipiac, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @D1_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these in the timeline. Other way, it's fine, an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. A big thanks once again to Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 for joining me in my segment, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'll be coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.